A homeless woman gives all her money so an elderly man can take the bus and get home. But the next day, she's left in shock when she finds out who he really is. The night was falling over the city, and in the corner of a forgotten square, Mary was collecting pieces of cardboard to lie on. Her eyes carried a deep fatigue, not just from the cold and hunger, but from years of silent struggle against a world that never gave her a break. No one had called her by name for a long time. To those who noticed her presence, she was just another shadow between the corners, a lost figure among the alleys. Her face, marked by the sun and time, hid memories of a life that once was different. She had not always been there, reduced to an existence without name or direction. Mary had been a strong woman, a worker with a big heart. From a young age, she knew what responsibility was. As the oldest child in a humble family, she dedicated her childhood and youth to taking care of her younger siblings. As her parents, consumed by addiction and poverty, lacked the strength to support the household. She grew up without toys, without dreams of a girl, without time to imagine a different future. She started working early, first washing clothes, then cleaning houses. The money was little, but she did what she could to keep her siblings fed. Destiny, however, was not generous. When she turned 20, a fire destroyed the shack where she lived. The fire took her parents, her siblings, her entire history. Mary survived, but her soul would forever carry the marks of the disaster. Without family, home, or anyone to support her, she wandered aimlessly until she found work as a housekeeper in a small hotel. For a while, she believed that maybe she could start over, but life in the shadows pursued her. Her boss, a cruel and ruthless man, exploited her labor until one day, without explanation, he let her go. Without a home, money, or a single friendly face, Mary was thrown to the streets, where hunger and cold became her daily companions. Even in the midst of misery, she did not allow life's harshness to erase her essence. If she found 2 loaves of bread, she would share them with someone. If she found an old blanket, she offered it to someone who was shivering more than she was. She knew the world was cruel, but that never stopped her from extending a hand to those in need. Perhaps it was this kindness that on that cold night would place her before destiny. Mary arranged the pieces of cardboard around her, trying to find a minimally comfortable position to face another cold night. The biting wind whispered between the alleys, and the few passers-by hurriedly avoided looking at her, as if her mere existence was an inconvenient reminder of a reality they preferred to ignore. She was used to it. Invisibility was a constant burden. She no longer expected kind looks or words of comfort. The world had gotten used to treating her as part of the urban landscape, an unwanted detail everyone preferred to forget. But Mary had never allowed that indifference to harden her heart. Sighing, she wrapped herself more tightly in the rags she wore and looked around. The night seemed calm, like any other. But then, something caught her attention. Near the bus stop, an elderly man with white hair and an elegant posture was rummaging through his pockets with an anxious air. His face, though proud, carried a weight Mary recognized well: worry. She watched as he checked his coat pockets once again, frowning when he realized he couldn't find what he was looking for. He looked at the driver, who was waiting with an impatient expression. The old man sighed, hesitating, and took a step back, as if he was about to give up on the trip. Mary didn't think twice. Even knowing that those were the only coins she had, she stood up and walked over to the elderly man. He didn't see her right away, lost in his own thoughts. It was only when he felt her presence beside him that he looked up. "Good evening," Mary said, her voice rough from the cold. The man stared at her in surprise. His eyes scanned her thin figure, the rags she wore, and the skin marked by time and the streets. He said nothing, but his expression showed a mixture of surprise and discomfort. Mary wasn't intimidated. She opened her small bag and took out the few coins she had. They weren't many, but they were enough. She extended her hand to him. "Take it," she said, her voice full of simplicity and determination. The man's eyes widened. For a moment, he seemed not to understand what she was doing. He looked at the coins in her palm, then at Mary's face, and then shook his head. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice deep but hesitant. Mary kept her hand extended. Her fingers were reddened from the cold, and she was trembling slightly, but her expression was firm. "Please," she said, her voice calm. "You need it more than I do." He blinked several times, visibly unsettled. Mary saw that pride was battling with need in his mind. "But it's your money," he said. "I can't take this from you." Mary smiled slightly. To her, it didn't matter. It never had. "You have somewhere to go tonight. I don't," she said simply. "If you miss this bus, you'll have to wait longer in the cold." The old man was silent. His eyes softened for a moment, and he finally extended his hand, taking the coins with hesitation. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his tone conveying more than just simple gratitude. "You don't need to," Mary said. "Just go home." The driver was already preparing to close the doors, and the elderly man, still reluctant, gave Mary one last look before boarding the bus. He watched her for a moment, as if trying to commit her image to memory. "At least tell me your name," he said, before taking his first step onto the vehicle. Mary hesitated for a moment, surprised by the request. No one ever asked her name. No one cared. "Mary," she said simply. The old man nodded slowly, as if trying to remember her name. Then, with a slight wave, he boarded the bus and disappeared into the night. Mary stood still for a few seconds, watching the bus drive away. The coins she had given meant that she would have nothing to eat that night, but that didn't matter. Her heart felt light. With one last sigh, she returned to her corner in the square and lay down on the cardboard, trying to ignore the cold that enveloped her. Dawn arrived without haste, and the chill of the early morning still lingered in Mary's bones. The sunlight spread across the square, but it brought no warmth. It only announced that another day, just like the others, was beginning. She slowly opened her eyes, squinting against the light. Her body was stiff, her joints ached, as if they were rusty gears. She ran her hands over her thin arms, trying to generate some heat, but it was useless. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her of the hunger that had accompanied her for days. There was nothing to eat, not even a crumb forgotten in her pockets. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the empty feeling in her stomach and the exhaustion that seemed to cling to her skin like an invisible weight. She needed to get up. She needed to move. The longer she stayed there, the harder it would be to find something to eat. Hunger was a constant battle, and she knew no one would come to save her. She was preparing for another day of struggle when the sound of an engine made her stop. She slowly turned her face, frowning, as she saw a shiny black car approaching. It was an expensive vehicle, different from those that usually pass through those streets. When it stopped a few meters from where she was, Mary felt a pang in her chest. The passenger window rolled down slowly, and behind it, an elegant man was watching her. He had a serious face, but without any hostility. His eyes evaluated every detail of her figure, from the skin marked by the sun to the tattered coat she was clutching to her chest. Mary tensed up. It was never a good sign when someone of her status caught the attention of the rich. "Are you Mary?" the man said, his voice firm but not aggressive. She narrowed her eyes, instinctively taking a step back. "Who wants to know?" she replied, keeping her voice cold and defensive. The man didn't smile, but he also didn't show impatience. His gaze remained fixed on hers, studying her reaction. "Someone wants to see you," he said, as if it were a simple fact. Mary felt a shiver run down her spine. It didn't make sense. Who could want to see her? She owed nothing to anyone, had no family, no connections. I don't owe anyone anything, she said, crossing her arms as if that would create a barrier between her and the man. It's not about that, he said, his voice patient but leaving no room for doubt. There's nothing to fear. Mary laughed without humor. Nothing to fear, she said, taking another step back. A man in an expensive car stops in front of a homeless woman and says someone wants to see her. That never means anything good. The man sighed, as if he had expected this reaction. I understand your distrust, he said, leaning slightly forward, but I'm not here to harm you. The person who wants to see you only wants to talk. Mary shook her head, still reluctant. Whoever it is, they can come here, she said. I don't need to get in that car. The man tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing her words. Unfortunately, that's not possible, he said. The person who wants to see you cannot come here. But he asked me to bring you. He wants to thank you. Mary blinked, surprised. Thank me, she said. The man nodded. Yes, he said. Last night you helped a man at the bus stop. He wants to speak with you. Mary's heart began to race. The elderly man, the man she had helped with her last coins. He wants to speak with me because why? She said, suspicious. The man remained patient, his expression unchanged. He was moved by what you did, he said, and he wants to thank you personally. Mary frowned, still hesitant. I didn't do anything special, she said, shaking her head. I just gave some coins. For you, it might have been nothing, the man said, but for him, it was something very important. Mary felt an uncomfortable sensation grow inside her. She didn't like favors. She didn't like surprises. I don't need thanks, she said. I don't want anything in return. He doesn't want to give you anything in return either, the man said calmly. He just wants to see you. Then Mary looked at the street around her, as if searching for an escape, but no one seemed to be paying attention to her, as always. Her instincts screamed not to trust. People like her weren't called for meetings with rich men, but at the same time, there was something in the man's demeanor, in the calmness of his voice that didn't seem like a trap. Still, she resisted. If I get in this car and go to some strange place, no one will notice if I disappear, she said, her voice low. Who guarantees me this isn't a lie? The man sighed. You are free to refuse, he said, but I assure you, you'll be refusing the one chance in your life when someone wants to offer you something with no ulterior motive. Mary felt a lump form in her throat. I don't like depending on anyone, she said. I'm not asking you to depend, he said. I'm only asking you to accept an invitation. Mary bit her lip. For a second, she almost turned her back and ran away. But then, against all her instincts, she took a deep breath. If this is a trap, I swear I'll regret it, she said, still hesitating. The man opened the car door. If you want to leave halfway through, I'll drop you off wherever you want, he said. She hesitated for another moment, then slowly got in. Mary felt the soft seat under her thin, tired body, a strange sensation for someone used to the hard, cold ground of the streets. The vehicle glided smoothly along the asphalt, moving away from the square she knew so well, taking her to a destination that was completely unknown to her. She looked out the windows as the streets passed by, each one cleaner, more organized, farther from the dirty, grey reality to which she belonged. The contrast between the city she was leaving behind and the neighborhoods they were passing through was glaring. With every block, the facades of houses grew larger, more imposing. The sidewalks were immaculate, the gardens well kept. Mary felt her stomach churn. She had never been in a place like this. In fact, she had never imagined that one day she would pass through these streets in any way other than observing from a distance, knowing she didn't belong there. "Where are we going?" she asked, looking at the man driving the car. "You'll see soon enough," he said, not taking his eyes off the road. Mary didn't like the answer. She distrusted everything and everyone. This world she was entering, even if only for a moment, didn't belong to her. The car turned onto a street lined with tall trees. The view ahead made her catch her breath. A huge mansion stood at the end of the path. The tall gates, and beyond them, a garden so well kept that it looked like a painting. The lawn was immaculate, the flowers arranged so harmoniously that they almost didn't look real. Mary's heart started to race. The car stopped in front of the gates, which opened automatically. The driver continued forward without hesitation, while Mary tried to understand why, of all the people in this world, they had brought her to this place. When the vehicle finally stopped in front of the main entrance, Mary hesitated. Her fingers clenched around the tattered fabric of her clothes. Her instincts screamed not to get out of the car, that this wasn't for her. The door opened. The man who had brought her turned to her. "You can get out," he said calmly. Mary didn't move. "This is a mistake," she said, shaking her head. "I shouldn't be here." "But you are," he said. "He's waiting for you." She moistened her dry lips, her heart still racing. Then, gathering the little courage she had left, she stepped out of the car. The ground beneath her feet was polished stone. The large wooden door in front of her seemed even heavier than the air surrounding the place. Before she could step back, the door opened and a man with a neutral expression invited her in. Mary had no choice, or did she? She could simply turn and run away. But something inside her stopped her. She crossed the entrance hesitantly. The inside of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. The floor gleamed as if it had never been stepped on. The high ceiling and the crystal chandeliers looked like they belonged to another world. She had never felt so out of place in her entire life. And then, in the center of the grand, well-lit hall, there he was. The elderly man from the previous night. Mary stopped where she was, unsure of what to do. He was sitting in a luxurious armchair, his body relaxed, but his eyes alert. He smiled when he saw her. "Mary," he said, his voice calm. She didn't respond. She just watched him, suspicious. "I imagine you have many questions," he said. She finally found her voice. "This is all a mistake," she said, raising her hands as if she wanted to distance herself from the scene around her. "I don't know what I'm doing here." "But I do," he said. Mary frowned. "Why?" she said. "Why did you bring me here?" The elderly man leaned slightly forward. "I needed to get to know you better," he said. "Last night, you helped me without knowing who I was, without hesitation, even without having anything. You gave me what you had." Mary felt her entire body stiffen. "I didn't do anything special," she said, defensive. "You did more than you realize," he said. She pressed her lips together. She didn't like where this conversation was going. "I went out to visit a friend yesterday," he said, crossing his hands over his lap. "But distracted, I forgot my wallet and phone at home. When I realized, it was too late. There was no way to call my son to pick me up. I needed to go back by bus." Mary blinked slowly. "So," she said hesitantly. "So you appeared," he said. "And without knowing me, without knowing who I was, you offered me your last coins." She looked away. "I didn't think it was important," she said, uncomfortable. The elderly man smiled slightly. "But it was," he said, "because no one does that, or at least almost no one. People with so much more than you would have ignored me. They would have turned their eyes away and gone on their way." Mary didn't know what to respond. "I'm a rich man," he said after a moment, "very rich. And I'm used to seeing people asking something from me. But last night, for the first time in a long time, someone gave me something without expecting anything in return." Mary kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't expect anything," she said, "and I don't want anything." The elderly man nodded slowly. "I believe you," he said, "and precisely because of that, I want to hear your story." Mary lifted her eyes, surprised. "My story?" she said. "Yes," he said. "I want to know who you are, how you got here." She pressed her lips together. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice low. "It matters to me," he said. Mary felt a weight in her chest. No one had ever wanted to hear her story before. "If you don't want to talk, I'll understand," he said, "but I would very much like to hear it." She remained silent for a long moment. Then finally, she took a deep breath, and she began to speak. She told him about her difficult childhood, the siblings she took care of because her parents were lost in addiction. She talked about the fire that took everything she had, the crushing loneliness that came afterward. She talked about the years of struggle, the jobs she had and lost, the doors that were closed. She spoke of fear, hunger, and pain. But she also spoke of kindness, of what she believed in. The silence that settled in the hall after Mary finished her story was dense, almost palpable. The elderly man remained seated in his armchair, his eyes fixed on her, but without saying a word. His face, which had been calm and controlled before, now carried an expression of something Mary couldn't define at first. Sadness, perhaps, or admiration. She looked away, feeling the weight of her own past stretch over her like a long shadow. No one had ever listened to her like that. She had never told her entire story before. Now here she was, completely exposed in front of a man who, until the previous night, had been a complete stranger. Finally, the elderly man let out a long, deep sigh, running his hands over his knees as if trying to organize his thoughts. "You've lived things no one should live," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "And still, you found the strength to go on and to help others." Mary shrugged. "I didn't do more than anyone else would do," she said, emotionless. The elderly man shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most would have turned their face, ignored it, walked on. But you, even with nothing, chose to give the little you had." Mary didn't answer. The elderly man fell silent for another moment, then stood up slowly, walking over to one of the large windows in the hall. He looked outside, thoughtful. "I can't allow you to keep living like this," he said finally. Mary frowned. "What do you mean?" she said. He turned to face her, determination now evident in his expression. "I want to help you," he said. "It doesn't make sense to me that someone like you should keep sleeping in the cold, without food, without a place to stay." Mary felt a knot form in her chest. I don't know what to say," she said hesitantly. The elderly man gave a small smile. "You don't need to say anything," he said. "I've made my decision." He walked over to the door of the hall and called someone. Mary watched as firm footsteps echoed through the corridor, and moments later, the man who had brought her there entered the hall. Until then, she hadn't known who he was, but the way the elderly man looked at him made it clear there was a bond between them. "Mary, this is my son Daniel," the elderly man said, gesturing toward the man. Mary looked at Daniel cautiously. Now that she knew his identity, she understood why he carried himself with such a confident yet discreet posture. He gave her a slight nod, but remained silent, waiting for his father's words. The elderly man turned to Daniel with a firm tone, but filled with decision. "I want you to arrange a place for Mary to stay," he said. "Something dignified. Something that will finally give her the security that's been denied her for so long." Mary's eyes widened. "Wait," she said, raising her hands. "I can't accept this." The elderly man looked at her with patience. "You can," he said, "and you should." Mary's heart began to race. "I don't want to be a burden to anyone," she said. "I'm used to taking care of myself." The elderly man smiled gently. "If you were alone, you wouldn't have survived this long," he said. "You've always helped others. Let someone help you for the first time." Mary looked down. A part of her wanted to refuse, to leave and never come back. But another part, that part which for years had wanted a fresh start, had dreamed of having a second chance, wanted to accept. She clenched her fists. I don't know what to do," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The elderly man nodded. "Then for now, just accept," he said. Mary closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she found the elderly man's gentle gaze on her, and for the first time in a long time, she said, "Okay." That night, Mary slept in a soft bed. For the first time in years, she felt the warmth of clean blankets surrounding her body. The scent of freshly washed sheets filled her senses. She closed her eyes, her stomach satisfied after a warm meal, and she cried. The following days were a whirlwind. The elderly man not only arranged a dignified place for her to stay, but also organized medical care for her weakened health. Mary received new clothes, a hot bath, and a comb for her tangled hair. And then something she never expected came. "I want you to work for me," the elderly man said one morning, while they were having coffee at the massive table in the mansion. Mary's eyes widened. "Work?" she said, as if the word were strange to her. "Yes," he said. "I know you can do much more than you think, but to start, I want you to take care of the gardens and help around the house. Then we'll see where else you can fit." Mary blinked several times. "Why are you doing this?" she said. The elderly man smiled. "Because I believe in you," he said. Mary felt a lump in her throat. She accepted the job. The first few days were difficult. She still felt out of place, as if she were living a reality that didn't belong to her. But little by little, she began to adjust. She woke up early, took care of the gardens, helped with the housework, and as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the elderly man began encouraging her even more. "I want you to study," he said one day. Mary laughed, not believing it. "Study?" she said. "I don't even know where to start." "I'll help you figure it out," he said. And so, for the first time in her life, Mary went back to learning. She started with small studies, reading, writing. Later, the elderly man encouraged her to go for something bigger. Months passed. Mary was no longer the woman who slept on the sidewalks. She smiled more, spoke more. She regained her confidence and, more importantly, found her dignity again. With the support of the elderly man and his family, she found a home, a steady job, and finally a life that had always been denied her. Years later, when she looked back, Mary still felt emotional when remembering the night she gave her last coins to a stranger. That small gesture, which would seem insignificant to many, completely changed the course of her life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.